keeping you company this Ramadan.
Welcome back. You're still tuned in to News and Views on myself, Salailo Makwidi. The time is 20 minutes past 9 Central African time. And we're going to be switching gears now to, I think, what's a very, very interesting turn of events. What's currently happening out in Iran. We all know, I think, by now, this war between Iran, Spain, and, Iran, Israel, and the USA, a joint operation by USA and Israel, ultimately leading us where we find ourselves, where there's been an exchange of fire against Iran, and Iran retaliating against Israel and some of the other Gulf states that are hosting US bases. And it has gotten a bit interesting because right now it looks like Spain has found itself almost at the center of a growing, shall we say, transatlantic storm. This is after refusing to allow the United States to use its military base for strikes linked to Iran. Spanish Prime Minister Mr. Pedro responded to President Trump, who essentially threatened to sever trade ties with a very, very defined message of saying a no to war. That's the official almost messaging coming out of Spain. It happened in a nationally televised address from Madrid. Prime Minister Sanchez framed Spain's position as a defense of international law and multilateralism, something that I think is becoming concerning as a concept that is not respected the world over. And he also drew parallels with what we saw happen in Iraq, what happened in Ukraine, and ultimately the genocide that we saw unfold in Gaza, and warned that there might be a breakdown of international legality. What we're seeing where countries like Israel, countries like the United States of America, essentially going about things with such impunity. And it'll be very, very interesting to see what's going to be happening from now onwards. And this morning we're going to be unpacking what this diplomatic clash means, not just for Spain and the United States, but for NATO. What does it mean for the European Union and just the world that is seemingly becoming increasingly divided? And there's a lot of question marks about sovereignty, about global power, and global multilateralism. And we're going to be doing that with activist and researcher Marta Garrich. Marta, good morning. Thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate you giving us your time this morning to unpack, I think, what's very, very important. As a Spanish national also, I think this is one headline that has sparked your interest, and I'm looking forward to hear what you have to say about it.
Yeah, good morning, Salailo. So, the news coming from home have been interesting in the last few days. But I guess, and you were mentioning, I think it's in line with Spain's posture or position in terms of international legality. What we've been seeing in the last maybe last year, 2 years. So there's nothing that it's surprising, I would say.
And I think one thing that was very, very important for me was how Sanchez referenced Iraq. He also, referenced Gaza. He referenced what we saw unfold out in Ukraine. It was almost a cautionary example of intervention. What lessons do you think can we take from those conflicts and try and apply, learn, and make sense of what we see currently happening between Iran, Israel, and the United States of America?
Yeah. So I think there's several parts to your question. So the first is that when for me, one important moment of his televised appearance, 10 minutes, in which he spoke to everyone. No, he speaks or throws shade at Trump. He speaks to his colleagues in Europe. He speaks to the population in Spain, and he speaks also to the opposition to this position that he's taken, or the coalition, the government coalition has taken, because there's also some critical voices inside of Spain. So there's a bit of everything in those 10 minutes. But one of the things that he says very clearly is that this is about defending international legality that protects us all, and in particular vulnerable populations, which is the societies at large. So that's the first thing. And he says, I think the lesson that we can draw from history all along is that bombs have never led to good outcomes, no? And he references from the First World War, where after the First World War, the German Chancellor was asked, how did the First World War start? And then he says, well, I wish I knew. And he says that often, this kind of catastrophic conflicts start from what he says go many answers, but hand in hand with miscalculations, unforeseen events, and technical failures. But importantly, you spoke about Iraq, and Iraq here has many meanings. I mean, one is the clear lessons that we've all taken of a war that was created, an attack on Iraq on a false premise, of nuclear weapons. And in many ways, he references to, if you think back of 2003, there was an important speech by the foreign minister of France at the UN Security Council, where France is members, and he very strongly criticized this move. He pushed back, and his name was Villepin, against what was a US CISO fabricated and attack, and one that was contrary to what their intelligence was saying. But importantly, this has another meaning in Spain. March, and we want to talk March 2003, there's an infamous image that captured it all, with Aznar, who was then the Prime Minister of Spain, Tony Blair, and Bush taken in Azores, in Portuguese territory, so to speak, because Aznar at the time, which was the PP, the Partido Popular, which is the conservative party, to PSOE, which Pedro Sánchez is part of the Socialist Workers' Party, he threw Spain's support totally behind President George W. Bush. That sparked massive protests in Spain under the slogan "No to War." And again, if referencing to yesterday's televised appearance of Pedro Sánchez, he said very clearly, our response is very clear, and it can be summarized in 4 words. He says, "No a la guerra." So no to war, right? 3 words in English. Now let's go the next year. In March 2004, we have a massive attack. 10 bombs explode simultaneously in 4 commuter trains in Spain. It's Al-Qaeda bombs, although very early on, and for 3 days, because general elections in Spain were 4 days later. Aznar again comes out, and during 4 days, they twist reality to say it's not Al-Qaeda, it's ETA, which is the Basque separatist party. They came very early on to say it was not them. It was very clear to popular opinion that was not the way, and ETA at the time was in its last legs, and it was in any case that was not part of what had been their modus operandi. General elections come, and Spain loses its, the Partido Popular Aznar, who had to drag Spain into the Iraq war against the general population's opinion and position. They lose their absolute majority. What's more, they lose the elections. And it's when Zapatero, which is Pedro Sánchez's predecessor, rises to power. So the reference to the Iraq war by Pedro Sánchez references both to a lesson to the international public, but it also brings Spaniards back to the memory of what was a stance then, and it continues to be a stance today. And in recent polls also in Spain, there's clear that 77% of Spaniards think that Trump's presidency is bad or very bad. So he knows he's got the support of the population in the stance that it's taken. And if I can take you,
Yes. I just before you finish, I just want to segue a bit because we are quickly running out of time.
Okay.
Just a country like Spain, do you think realistically it can pursue any, shall I say, a peace-orientated foreign policy when it is embedded in global alliance like NATO? We're seeing NATO countries almost mobilize, the likes of France, have come out, the likes of Germany, the UK themselves have said, they are prepared. They're also mobilizing militarily to be part and parcel of this war. Spain, realistically, do you see them being that one voice that can give a peace-orientated approach on this issue?
Yeah, I mean, realistically, Spain clearly is not a major player in terms of economic and other might in Europe, but it is emerging as a voice that it's calling back on the left when in a moment where we're seeing the right swipe across the continent. One thing that it's important, and here's where I was taking you when you reference also Ukraine. Last half a year ago in June, also when Trump also pushed NATO to spend to raise up the NATO members, to raise up the 5% expenditure, of the 5% of GDP on defense, right? Spain already there was a target of 2%. We're not a country that can manage the 2% in defense, especially with the broad left coalition in government, where priority coming out of the pandemic has been really on social expenditure, on health, on generally looking really after the well-being of the population. But and that's in the context of the Ukraine war, and Trump threatening to leave NATO, and a lot of the European members and quickly adhering to this 5% increase. Again, here Spain very clearly spoke to the rest of the members ahead of a summit where he described that the demand was incompatible with Spain's social welfare priorities, and that would require cutting public services and raising taxes. So they said while their support for NATO was consistent, they were also a sovereign country, and they could not, and plus plus they would not be going for this 5%. They also warned that these spending targets would force Europe into reliance of US weaponry where there was no actual security needs as such, right? And here's the thing, and what's interesting, I don't know, what I'm saying is that yesterday's televised appearance and Spain's position is consistent with the months of saying war leads nowhere, right? Whether it has weight or not, what's been interesting to see in the last 48 hours when Trump then threatened to sever trade ties with Spain is that it has been Ursula von der Leyen, it has been several in the European Union and European Commission coming out to say that commercial agreements signed with Europe are to be respected, and Spain is a part of Europe. And they've also reached out to Pedro Sanchez to offer their support, such as Macron and others. So it's an interesting. What we're seeing is a lot of pieces moving, where also Spain's own internal dynamics, where the population sits, also with the Gaza war, with the partial embargo for weapons to Israel, sits, and what is playing out at European level, and generally, I think a very principled position in terms of respecting international legality that, as he says, defends us all.
Lastly, before I let you go, Marta, two quick questions. Just looking at the EU in general and how they've been responding to this latest war. Countries like France, countries like Germany, as mentioned, and the UK. How would you assess their different positions and the impact that they might have on this war? And coming back to Spain, threat of severing economic ties. Do you think that will play in the mind of the Spanish people, of the Spanish leadership, considering what Donald Trump has said and how erratically he sometimes acts?
Yeah, so I can't speak much about how what other European countries and how it plays, but I can speak for Spain. I mean, there's two things already. So interestingly, again, last year, as Spain positioned itself as not willing to raise its expenditure on defense budget. Pedro Sanchez was about to meet with also its Chinese counterpart, and one of his declarations was also that Europe needs to increase ties, commercial ties with China, as to counterbalance what increasingly, and that was in the midst of the tariff so-called war and all the different threats. And I think Pedro Sanchez in here is also reading the calculation is some exhaustion of appeasing, of Europeans appeasing Trump, whether it's in tariff disputes, defense commitments, or what is not. No, but in any case, what he did also announce when the U.S. government came in quickly after this meeting with China, saying, well, what Spain is doing is tantamount to cutting their own throat, was to announce that while Spain had been providing 1.3% of a target that it's 2% for the NATO, defense budget, he announced that he was going to increase and to reach that 2%, which is 10 billion in Spain's budget. Now, Spain, like all our southern European counterparts, I think I grew up hearing we are in crisis, and that is a big part of our political sovereign debt, of our political speech, and our discourse, in the public fora. But the one thing as well is that we have a huge housing crisis that this government is yet trying to control, and we have unemployment. So I think one of 4 messages that were also very clear yesterday in his speech was one of that Spain is robust enough to absorb whatever commercial implications this has, that there's European members so he again called that, but it was a lot about our priorities is helping Spaniards who are stuck in the region, but also that's to support our people. And again, I think he's clever like that, because we have the social situation in Spain is one where there's huge housing crisis, where public hospitals are struggling after the pandemic. And so his is one of appealing, saying what we're not going to do is line out the pockets of a few who make money building missiles instead of building hospitals. So I think it's a calculated risk, but I do think that where Spanish public opinion is on the side of our coalition government. And that is also saying, and again, I'm saying there's many contexts to read, but one is that we're going into general elections next year, and the extreme right is rising in Spain, as it's been a context across Europe.
No, most definitely, Marta Garrich. Always a pleasure having you on Salam Media. Really appreciate you giving us your time, and it's going to be an interesting couple of weeks. It's going to be an interesting year, and I hope we chat again soon. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Lovely to be here.
There we go. And with that, we're going to take a quick break. News and views will continue right after this.